Hi, my name is Meg Edwards and I'm a GTD coach. And today I'm here with a very special guest, my daughter, Annie. Annie, please go ahead and introduce yourself to the GTD community because people have been hearing about you for many, many years, but they haven't necessarily met you. And so this is an opportunity for them to finally meet you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Annie. I'm Meg's daughter. I'm 27. I live in New York. I've been here for 5.5 years, and I work in public relations for an entertainment and music PR firm.
So one of the things that for some of you who may be new to the GTD community, and there's lots of people who have been hearing Annie's stories for decades, because, David Allen still says that he thinks that Annie was the youngest participant to one of his seminars, because when I learned about the Getting Things Done methodology from your Aunt Marion and from my sister Marion, I took you at about 2.5 months to the Getting Things Done seminar, which at that point was called Managing Actions and Projects. Because your mother very much needed it, because who needed an overwhelmed mom? You've just grown up with this. I think in some ways you don't know kind of anything else. When you were little in the same office, you used to come down with your backpack and, we would take your folder out, which was you had a 2 home and a 2 school folder. And we would take the 2 home folder and literally take it out, put it in this inbox, and you would watch me clarify and organize it. And, folks, I'm thoroughly embarrassing my daughter here.
No, I think there are parts of it that are really ingrained in my workflows that I don't even really know it. Like, you were asking me, do you have an agendas list? And I'm like, well, yeah, I have an agendas list. And do I have a waiting for? And it's like, yes. And do I use those perfectly? No, but I have enough of a framework to make sure that nothing really can ever get lost, because I'm always capturing it and writing it down somewhere and trying not to keep it in my head.
Well, that was the interesting thing when we were talking about this yesterday, was that how I asked you many, many years ago, like, out of all the pieces of the Getting Things Done methodology, what did you find the most useful? And what did you say?
Defining the next action.
What makes that so powerful for you, defining the next action?
I think sometimes projects can feel so overwhelming, or you just don't know where to start on something. And when you're an assistant role and you're kind of getting things assigned quickly and maybe without as much clarity, sometimes your next action is to ask more clarifying questions because you can't really do it correctly until you have more information. Or sometimes the next action really is something that you don't want to do and you want to avoid. But if you can identify that that is the only thing you can do to move it forward, then you have a little bit more of an impetus to do it and not avoid it.
Did you find that the next action thinking was helping you with procrastination, of that avoidance of, I don't necessarily want to do that? Because sometimes it was more that those next actions that you had to do was going to have an uncomfortable conversation, that there was friction.
Yeah, or not. Or just sometimes you're like, I don't want to have to go back and ask my boss another question. But if you've really drilled down that that's the only way forward, then you have a little bit more confidence to go back and say, hey, I need a little bit more of your time to define something.
And what about your email inbox?
Not always to zero. Definitely use it as a to-do list, or like these are the things that I can't lose today sort of thing. But I still try to write it down separate from my email.
You said you just use a simple Word doc to keep your next actions lists?
Yeah. I think, and then I don't delete it. I just move it into the done section, mostly because I like having everything really close together. I kind of like my to-do list to be as short as possible. And in a Google Doc, it's just there.
Well, what I think is such a great example for people to see is that how you can use a little bit of the Getting Things Done methodology and have a lot of impact. I think that people feel like it's an all or nothing deal. You don't have a project list. You know how to get your emails clarified and organized to zero so that you can separate out your doing time and your defining time, but that you use it to the extent that you need to in your current job. And as your roles and responsibilities change and grow, then you can add more pieces when you find that you need them. And I think that that's a great example. Our cousin Bobby, for many, many years, was always just so harping on himself because he felt like he had to use everything, like it was all or nothing. And he's like a master at the 2-minute rule. And, I said, Bobby, you got to get off your back about this. It's like, it's okay to just do a little bit of GTD. And if you find that you read the book or you skimmed the book or whatever it is, and what really stuck out with you was the 2-minute rule, then great. And then close the book and be done with it. And I think for you to grab on what I think is one of the main components of GTD is taking all that stuff that's unclarified and amorphous and drilling it down to the next action, which just really helps not be so stressed and really know, like, okay, the next action, the only thing I can do to move this forward is talk to my boss about it.
And then that gives you a little bit more peace of mind. I think something I've always struggled with is kind of like leaving the work at the door and not worrying about it into your evenings and weekends. And the more you can kind of clarify and say, okay, it's Saturday morning, and unless this is a really timely issue, like my next action is not until Monday. So it doesn't help me to worry about it.
And you can have your weekend.
Mm-hmm. The other thing I will say to people is don't worry if your kids don't want to do GTD.
Right.
I was not someone that was like, GTD when I was 8 and 9 and 10 and even into high school, right? Like I definitely was like, oh, Mom. But and then especially as soon as you get into really needing to manage yourself more independently in college and then definitely in the workforce, it becomes very clear why it is helpful.
Well, that's why we find at GTD Focus, where we really start to work with people on one-on-one coaching, is when people have entered the workforce as a knowledge worker. And before that, it's, I think, really the parents' role to be able to incorporate GTD from kind of behind the scenes. And, I think that what is so important is that when a parent is not so stressed and not dealing with the latest and the loudest, then you can really listen to your kids and really hear what has their attention. But it is really true, because I remember even in high school, we were going off to tennis. And I was like, now, do you have this? And do you have this? And do you have this? I said, Annie, wouldn't you like to have a checklist? She's like, nope. You're my checklist.
I'm like, do I still have a travel checklist? No. Should I make one? Yes.
No, but I think that that's really real, because I think that, and sometimes early on, I was kind of pushing it on you instead of letting it just happen organically. But this is why it was really fun when I was talking to you yesterday, that you were just naturally doing some of these lists that just were, you need them. And so why not use them? Well, thank you, Annie. I think that a lot of people are going to really love finally meeting you, because, again, they've heard about you for, 27 years. Ever since I've been a GTD coach, I've been talking about what GTD has meant for me being your mom.
And I can confidently say that it's made you a better mother, for sure.
Oh, I wasn't expecting that to happen today. Well, thank you. Well, it's definitely made me a lot less stressed and much more in control as a mom. And to really, one of the things that I'll be talking about in these future videos is we're always talking about actions and projects, but there are also areas of focus and responsibilities, which is that level above, projects. And, I'm very fortunate that I learned this methodology, and I learned about really capturing all those areas of focus and responsibilities because I had all these areas of focus responsibilities. I always say to people, you were just kind of one project after another. With camps and applications and doctor's appointments and all those kinds of things that you have to do. And then as you get older and older and older, my roles and responsibilities kind of lessen more to a monitoring role, and that you're taking on all those roles and responsibilities for yourself. And, I'm just so grateful that I've been able to have this methodology from the get-go with you, and to be able to support you. Definitely far from perfect. But it's definitely kept me a little bit more in the driver's seat and a little bit more in control with everything that I had to manage, particularly as a single mom, when you turned probably around 4.5. And it's been you and I for a really long time. So thank you on this Sunday morning to do this video with your mom. And, thanks everybody for, listening to this. Always love to hear any comments or any questions that you have. Would be happy to answer them. So have a great day, everybody. Thanks. For more GTD resources, please visit gettingthingsdone.com and David Allen's YouTube channel. For more information on GTD coaching, please email us at info@gtdfocus.com or visit our website at gtdfocus.com.